Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hey Douglas, how are you? We're fine.
I'm good, Destiny. How are you?
Fine.
Hey everybody, you guys have to excuse me. It's 3:48 in the morning for me, so I'm a little bit sleepy. So I hope you'll bear with me.
Yeah, no problem. All right.
Okay, thank you for having me. Are you ready for me to begin?
Yes, we are. So
wonderful.
Tell us about the Telos white paper.
Okay. Well, let me. I had prepared something about why I'm excited about blockchain and in Africa, particularly. Can I mention that? And I do talk very much about Telos in regards to that.
All right, no problem, Douglas.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm really, like I said, I'm really excited to be here and taking part in this event. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but maybe next year if you invite me back, maybe I'll be able to come. Who knows? So I would love that. I feel that African nations are poised to make major technological leaps thanks to blockchain technology. Blockchain technology, to me, is an opportunity leveler. In creating new ways to store value and record actions, it provides the opportunity to leapfrog existing systems. So, for example, for years, financial services were controlled by banks. Many people were left behind by these banks, and in many African nations, especially, this was a big issue. Many people were left out of the banking system and denied participation, in many facets of commerce, right? Then mobile phones came, and these people previously left out of the financial world suddenly had a way to participate in economies in new ways. When a payment system like M-Pesa came to Kenya and other countries, it kick-started the local economy. There was a large group of people who had been left behind by traditional banking that could now leapfrog that technology and move on to mobile payments. So that wrong of the past actually set up the opportunity of the present. People left out equals people hungry for a new solution. Of course, most of these mobile payment platforms had a cozy arrangement with the local mobile service provider, like M-Pesa did. They're actually owned by a Vodafone company called Safaricom, which gave that an advantage over the market. And the result was that there was very little competition within the space and therefore very high fees. It was still better than no banks at all for most people, but still not ideal. Users paid about 8% fees compared to lower fees elsewhere where there was more competition. So once again, the wrong of closing off the mobile platform to competing services set the stage for a big opportunity when the next technological leap would arrive. And blockchain is that next technological leap. Blockchain, or DLT for distributed ledger technology, it's a perfect public ledger. It's a better record-keeping platform than the proprietary systems that are used by banks now or payment platforms, and yet it's actually much easier for anyone to access. So blockchain ledgers can be reached instantly from anywhere that has access to the internet. And smart contracts, which are self-running programs built on blockchain and often involving money transfer, they make performing actions on the blockchains essentially free. So now, when you take smartphones that can connect to the internet easily and add to that the blockchain power, suddenly everyone can have access to a perfect ledger that handles finances and other transactions better and cheaper than old private payment platforms. So now the fact that these private payment platforms pushed out the competition and have high fees becomes the next massive opportunity for everyone who was once excluded or overcharged by that system. Blockchain-based payment platforms will overtake private payment platforms in Africa very quickly because of this. Old companies that never had to compete will just be overrun by nimble new finance and payment apps that can do a lot more and cost less. And I think that these apps will very likely be built by local companies that start very small, maybe just a few people, but they leverage the power of blockchain to compete with much bigger established companies. So this is why I say that blockchain is an opportunity leveler. It levels the opportunity disparity between small groups of people and big companies. Now, any developer using blockchain can remove these massive advantages that used to be enjoyed by banks and then by big mobile network monopolies. A few developers can actually compete with these in many ways. I'm using finance as an example, but this is true across all kinds of industries. And it's especially powerful where people have been previously left out of the technological advances, because it allows those people the chance to leapfrog old technology and go from the back of the line to the front. From what I see, many people in African nations have been left out of a lot of things. And that's wrong. But as I said before, yesterday's wrong often creates today's opportunity. And that's why I believe that the opportunity for Africans to benefit from blockchain is simply massive. This will cross all kinds of industries. It's not just payments. It's not even close. Real estate, manufacturing, agriculture, shipping, energy production, right? These are all big businesses, and big businesses in Nigeria, right? And in Africa and all around the world. Practically every industry that could be revolutionized by blockchain. And the opportunity is really just that big. It's bigger for Africa than a lot of places because of this disparity, because this ability to leapfrog, right? So that means that Africans may beat Europeans and Americans to a lot of important innovations, and that's exciting. It's an opportunity leveler. So as Destiny mentioned, I'm one of the people who helped launch the Telos blockchain. Telos in particular has more potential than most blockchains to bring new opportunities to Africa and Africans. And there's several reasons for this. First, Telos is one of the most advanced blockchains in the world. Bitcoin was the first blockchain, of course, and it's wonderful, very important. But its power to do really useful things like running smart contract is actually quite limited. Bitcoin creates one block about every 10 minutes. Telos, on the other hand, creates a new block every half second. That's 1,200 times faster. Speed is an important measure for blockchain power for obvious reasons. Another important measure is capacity, right? How many transactions can a given blockchain actually support? You want to see a blockchain that has a very large number, because in the near future, there's going to be a whole lot of transactions and apps running on these blockchains. You want to make sure that it can support it. So what are the highest capacity blockchains in the world right now? Well, if you look at blocktivity.info right now, you'll see that Telos and its close cousin EOS are at the very top, running about 30 million and 40 million transactions per day, respectively. The next blockchains in line, are they running 20? Are they running 15? Are they running 10? No. The next ones are handling about 1 million transactions per day. And something like Ethereum is handling about half of that, around 600,000 transactions per day right now. That's one independent measure of the really massive capacity and power of Telos. So any apps running on Telos will be able to use a whole lot of transactions without any problems. On other app blockchains, this might not be the case. And this is one reason why, say, SesaCash built on Telos, because they plan on doing a lot of transactions, and they want that capacity. But Telos is also a leader in other ways. For example, we launched in a special way that is quite uncommon today. Just like Bitcoin, but not like very many other projects at all anymore, Telos launched without raising any money from investors or any ICO. And the about 150-person global grassroots team that launched Telos only kept 5% for themselves, and give away 95% to the Telos community. And we did this to ensure that Telos would be one of the most evenly distributed of all cryptocurrencies. So there are no whales or massive owners on Telos. But this is really important. This means that no one controls the block There's no one who secretly has 50, 60, whatever percent. It's controlled by the entire base of owners and who vote to guide it. And it's really decentralized. So when people build dApps on Telos, they know that there's no one who secretly, or maybe not secretly, is in control. So smaller dApps and users can't be pushed out by big owners like on some other blockchain projects. Another important way that Telos is decentralized is geographic decentralization. Telos is run by about 50 network infrastructure operators called block producers. The Telos token holders vote on these block producers from among a much larger group of block producers who would like to run that work. This is a system that's called Delegated Proof of Stake, or DPoS, DPoS. Now, many blockchain projects are concentrated in certain regions of the world. A report just came out a few hours ago, I think, that 67% of all Bitcoin mining, for example, right now, takes place in China. EOS is another example of a network primarily operated by Chinese companies in China. But Telos is run by block producers all over the world, including in African nations. There are Telos block producers in South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria. So there's a real local component here. Nodes are closer for even faster response times. But more importantly, Telos is being run in part by Africans, for Africans, and other people on the rest of the planet. And that is, in fact, the very reason why you're having this conference is happening, in fact. That local connection with guys like Destiny, that's important in finding collaborators, users, and support. So Telos also has much more affordable place to launch an app than similar blockchains. By some calculations, it would cost about 80 times more to launch the same dApp on EOS compared to Telos, 80 times, even though basically underlying software is quite similar. And Telos goes even further because we've created a number of additional features that don't even exist on EOS, and these save a huge amount of time for developers. Here's an example. Let's say you have heard about the ability for blockchain dApps to let their users actually manage the dApp themselves through voting, right? That's revolutionary. You don't do that on Facebook, right? You only do that on blockchain dApps. But employing it, putting that into your dApps actually requires a lot of programming and testing, and then more programming and more testing, unless you build it on Telos. Because if you build it there, you don't need to do any of this because Telos already built all these functions for any dApp that comes to Telos. So we make them very easy for developers to add, and that, by the way, is free. Telos has a suite of tools called Telos Decide, which handles governance functions for dApps. No other blockchains have such a strong suite of tools for this. Telos Decide makes it easy for any dApp to add voting and committee management functions. We have dApp developers come to us and tell us that we saved them about a year of development by not having to create these things on their own, which means they have to spend less money, they got to launch faster. It's very important. Telos is also adding decentralized storage, which is an important tool for dApps to be able to use and share files instead of doing it on centralized services that are expensive like Amazon. Most apps actually need this, but almost no blockchains have this solution. So this is another big advantage for any dApps that develop on Telos. Now, even with low deployment costs, we realize that launching a new dApp is expensive, and that's why Telos set up a number of funding sources to help developers like you get projects off the ground. One example is Telos Works, which is a proposal system where people tell the Telos token holders about a project they wish to create that will help Telos. And if the token holders vote to fund this project, remember, through our revolutionary governance voting, they can vote. If they do, then the people who have proposed this project earn the money that they can use to get off the ground. It's very hard to get that first piece of money, but Telos realizes that by creating that for developers, we are creating opportunity for everyone on the blockchain, on the network. Telos Works has actually distributed millions already and helped launch some great new projects. And I believe that the presenters of this event actually are funded in part by a Telos Works proposal. So Telos also has a number of grants to reduce the cost of launching a new dApp. And there are several Telos developers who offer new developers building on the Telos blockchain help and experience. In fact, Telos organizations were proud to make some grants to Sesa Cash to help them move to Telos from another blockchain to remove their costs there. This was a big win for everyone involved, for the developers, for their users who get a better blockchain, and for Telos too, who gets a great new group of users who we're excited to have and who grow the blockchain for us in the future. So, if you're interested in the massive opportunity the blockchain presents for Africa, Africans, and really the world, and if you want to build a dApp on a blockchain that's independently measured by others as one of those powerful, highest capacity blockchains in the world, I would encourage you to look at Telos. Not only can you build on a powerful leading blockchain, but you can do it so much more affordably than competing blockchains. And there's even opportunities that we can help fund you to get started. And that really exists nowhere else. If you'd like to learn more about Telos, please look at telos.net or telosfoundation.io. And I'm here to answer any questions you guys may have. Thank you so much for listening to this.
All right. Thank you, Douglas. Let's put our hands together for Douglas.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Douglas, still stick around because I want to find out if any of us have questions for you based on everything that you talked about here today. Do we have questions? Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, Douglas, thank you for your presentation. You talked about control. When you're differentiating between Telos blockchain and the Bitcoin blockchain, you said something about control, that for the Telos blockchain, the control is spread across the world, the globe. And then for the Bitcoin blockchain, the control is kind of amongst some people. If I got that correctly, do you think that will have an impact for the Bitcoin growth going forward?
So what I'm hearing is the question is about the differences between Bitcoin and Telos, and especially in terms of control. Is that the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. Well, Bitcoin is what we call a first-generation blockchain. It's the very first blockchain, right? It uses something called proof of work, and to mine a block, people from all over the world, it's not just in China, it's only that 67% of these miners are in China. People all over the world will use their computers to try to solve a mathematical puzzle. Basically, they put all the transactions in that block together, they hashed it, and then a hash returns a number, and they try and find a number that's under the difficulty level. That's when you see like these big Bitcoin mining farms, and you see like a machine like an ASIC, that is a machine that has all these specialized chips to do that kind of math, that hashing math, as fast as possible. Because people make money by being the one to write that next block, right? But that's a huge amount of computing power that is is more than many countries actually use worldwide. But none of that computing power actually goes to recording anything on the blockchain. Really, all that those ASICs use is a single board computer, it's like a Raspberry Pi. It's actually usually a BeagleBoard single board computer, and that writes all the transactions. And it's enough to write the transactions because the transactions aren't very complex. That's a first generation proof of work. Doing that math is work, and you prove that you did the work, and that's how they prove that the network is secure, and it works very well. But again, it's literally doing all the calculations for what's actually going to be in the block on essentially a Raspberry Pi. And second generation blockchains like Ethereum are not very much better than that. But third generation blockchains like that are running on DPoS, delegated proof of stake, instead of running all that math, what they do is they have all the voters decide which of these block producers they want to run. The block producers then, and that election changes every minute. It can change every minute if people change their votes. though, instead of doing a bunch of work, those block producers know when they're going to produce, and instead of having all these very expensive chips that don't do anything to help the blockchain, they actually are using really big. We are using really big, powerful computers, and that means. But we know we aren't doing it to fight for the right to do the block. We get the right to do the block because we are voted for. So instead, we can use all that computing power to do really powerful things on the blockchain. That's why Bitcoin can do maybe 1 million transactions per day, and Telos right now is doing over 30 million transactions per day, and we're nowhere close to our capacity. We could probably do 100 million easily, maybe 200 million a day, and that's growing. We're constantly updating the software much faster than Bitcoin updates it. So these are some of the reasons why, these are some of the differences. Bitcoin, of course, is worth much more because Telos is new and people are still deploying on it. We are actually having our birthday for Telos right now, which is very exciting. But we're not 11 years old like Bitcoin. We're 1 year old. And people do Bitcoin mining, by the way, all over the world. It's just that 2/3 of those people are in China. That's not a horrible thing. There's nothing wrong with China, particularly. But you know, if you're in Africa, I would think that it would be interesting to know that you're building on a system that also exists, right, for you in your geographic region in a meaningful way, right? And Telos does. Telos is all over the world. We're on every continent but Antarctica. We have, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 teams at least who are doing important work in Africa, and I think it's actually much more. There's a lot of exciting things. There's payment platforms. There's people who are going to be launching like all kinds of exciting things in Africa. And one of the reasons is because it's so, in addition to being very powerful, it's very inexpensive compared to competing blockchains, and we also are creating ways to get that initial funding to developers, right? So that's great for countries that don't necessarily have as many financial resources, or countries where maybe they have all the financial resources in the world, but a lot of people, young people who are going to be developers, may not have access to that. We realize that having access to that is a differentiator, and we can help that, and we can get a lot more great apps on Telos, and we want that because we have the capacity to run it. So those are some of the differences. Does that sort of address your question?
Okay, did you answer the question? Okay, yes. Oh, we have one more question for you, Douglas, before we let you go.
Sorry, a quick one. I have 2 questions actually. Yes. You said, I understand that Telos is a third generation blockchain, makes it a proof of stake technology. If I want to maybe join Telos, how much am I going to stake on the platform so that I can be able to participate in the Telos network? Secondly, my second question is this. When we were talking about Telos, you said that the voters can be able to hold dApps on Telos network. And then you said that those dApps can be managed by the owners or something. I know that you can hold dApps on Ethereum, but I don't quite understand how it works with Telos. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Could somebody repeat the question, maybe a little closer to the computer microphone? I just couldn't hear it very well, and I want to give a good answer to that.
The proof of stake technology for Telos. I know that for you to be able to participate using proof of stake, you must be able to deposit an amount on the network, not like the proof of work that Bitcoin uses. So I'm asking for Telos, if you want to participate in the network, how much are you going to deposit for you to be able to participate in the proof of stake on the Telos network? And then holding dApps on Telos,
also want to understand well, because you said that Telos enables you to build apps that give privileges to the users of that apps. So I don't quite understand that.
So the first part, you were, am I correct? You were asking the difference between proof of work and delegated proof of stake. One of the differences is that you need to actually stake. You need to have resources to stake, and then how much do you need? Was that the first part of the question?
Okay. The question is actually how much.
How much do you need to stake?
Yes, you need to stake to participate, right? Yeah, to participate.
Yeah. So on Telos, there are different resources. There's CPU, which is how much computing can be done at time, and then there's network, which is how much can be pushed over the network. And you take your tokens and they say essentially you set them, you stake them. You understand this, so I'm kind of explaining to everybody else as well. You put them into an account that is still yours, and you can pull them out, over a 3-day process. But it reserves for you the use of network resources. That's what the staking is for.
As a block producer.
I'm sorry?
As a block producer or a miner.
As a block, how much do you need to stake to be a block producer? You don't really have to stake anything, very little to be a block producer. But you have to put up. But the expense of being a block producer is that you have to be running high-end computers and with good access, right? You could possibly do that in not necessarily have to own those. Do that through a service like DigitalOcean or something where you can rent a bare metal server, but it's expensive. If you want to run a dApp or want to do things, you stake tokens for the use that you and your users will be performing on the network. And basically it's percentage wise, right? So if the network can do 200 transactions in a day, and you want to do 200 million transactions in a day, and you want to do 200 transactions in a day, you need to stake about 1/1,000,000th of the total network stake. It's proportional, and those are reserved for you. And so it's easy to one can calculate how much one needs. But right now, it's not very much. For example, and the trade-off is, unlike Ethereum, where there is a transaction fee, there's gas fee for every transaction you do. On Telos, the trade-off for staking is you don't have to actually pay anything. And that's a big difference, because with Ethereum or anything that uses that type of gas fee, transaction fee, you're slowly depleting. You're buying a bunch and then you're using it over each transaction. On Telos, you stake a bunch and it stays there for as long as you need it. And as the network speeds up its capacity, you may actually need less. If you grow, you may need more. But we realized that the difference. So the one problem with this that we realized is that even though it's a much better model not to have transaction fees, it means that people do have to buy resources up front, and that's why Telos has a grant program called the Good Grant that provides 100% of the staking resources for almost any new dApp that comes to Telos for the first year, right? So with Ethereum, you can push those costs onto your users, and they have to pay the gas fee. And so a lot of people have used that just because they don't have to come up with that money in the beginning. On Telos, we say, we get it. We know that you need to build your dApp. Adding the cost of resources on top of that is a burden that might keep you away. We don't want that. So we have a grant program that'll pay for all of those for the first year anyway, and then you can transition off once you've got a blockchain business that's working well for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Douglas, for your time. and joining us all the way from you guys to tell us about the Telos white paper, as well as sharing your own personal opinion about chain technology in general. Ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hands together for Douglas.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
So here's a quick announcement. For as many that have questions for Douglas, you can actually reserve them for the TP Telos for Africa initiative.